I'm sitting in my aunt's big house, the kind with tall white columns and a front yard that looks like something out of a southern movie. 2 days ago, we buried her, and I'm still trying to make sense of everything. The funeral feels like a blur, faces, flowers, and words I barely heard because my heart was breaking. And yet here I am, alone, with a will that changed my life forever. Aunt Catherine left me everything, this house, and $3 million. And just as I was beginning to grieve in peace, the people who abandoned me 10 years ago suddenly appeared, smiling as if nothing had happened. My parents. The same people who decided one child was expendable. I guess I should take you back. My name's Madison, I'm 18 now, but the story really started when I was 8 years old. Back then, I lived in Alabama with my parents and 2 older brothers, Josh and Carter. They were 14 and 15, and to be honest, the sun rose and set on them as far as my parents were concerned. Football practice, games, trophies, my life was a quiet afterthought in the background of their noise. Don't get me wrong, my parents weren't cruel. They gave me food, sent me to school, bought me clothes when I needed them. But there's a big difference between being cared for and being loved. I wasn't cherished, I was tolerated. One hot summer night, I couldn't sleep and went downstairs for a glass of water. That's when I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices. "We can't keep this up, Mark," my mom whispered. "The mortgage is bleeding us dry, and your job's on the line." My dad sighed, sounding older than his 40 years. "I know, Laura. 3 kids, it's too much. We can't afford Josh and Carter's sports, let alone college for all 3. And then came the words that split my life in half. "Maybe Catherine could take Madison," Mom said. "She's got that big house in Arkansas, she's always asking about the kids. Maybe this is the solution." I remember clutching my glass so tight I thought it would break. I didn't really understand, not fully, but some part of me knew they were considering giving me away. Like I was a bill they couldn't pay anymore. A month later, when school let out for summer, they told me we were taking a road trip. Josh and Carter stayed home for football camp, of course. I was the one packed into the back seat of our old Chevy, driving mile after mile until we pulled up in front of a house that took my breath away. Huge yard, wide porch, perfect shutters, it was nothing like our modest place back in Alabama. That's when I met Aunt Catherine. She was tall, with sharp blue eyes and gray hair pulled back neatly, dressed in slacks and a white blouse even on a Saturday. At first, she seemed serious, almost intimidating. But then she smiled at me, really smiled, like she could see straight through me to who I was. "So this is Madison," she said. "Hello, sweetheart. I've been waiting a long time to meet you." We sat in her elegant living room, sipping iced tea from glasses that sparkled in the sunlight. I thought it was just a visit, a family trip. But an hour later, when my parents stood up to leave, I grabbed my bag too. That's when my mother put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Actually, honey, you're staying here for a while." I can still see the way their car disappeared down the long driveway, taillights fading into the summer dusk, while I stood frozen on the porch. That was the night I realized my family didn't just overlook me. They didn't want me at all. And yet, that's also the night I found someone who did. Aunt Catherine didn't just give me a room with a canopy bed and a view of her garden, she gave me stability, attention, and eventually, love. She became the parent I never had, the anchor that held me steady through storms I didn't even see coming. Looking back now, I realize that losing my parents wasn't really a loss, it was a trade. I lost people who saw me as a burden, but I gained someone who saw me as a blessing. And that changed everything. When we finally pulled into Arkansas after what felt like an endless drive, my jaw nearly dropped. Aunt Catherine's house wasn't just big, it was grand. The kind of place you see in southern films, with tall white columns, a sweeping porch, and a front yard that stretched out like a perfectly kept park. Compared to our modest place in Alabama, this looked like a mansion out of another world. Then she appeared. Aunt Catherine stepped onto the porch, tall and elegant, her gray hair pinned back into a neat bun. She wore a crisp white blouse and dark slacks, looking more like she was heading to a boardroom than greeting family. Her sharp blue eyes studied me for a moment. "So this is Madison," she said. For a second, I thought she seemed strict, maybe even intimidating. But then she smiled, and her whole face softened. "Hello, sweetheart. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. That smile. It was different. It wasn't the distracted half-smile I usually got from Mom when she was busy helping my brothers. It felt like she really saw me for the first time in my life. Inside, we sat in her elegant living room. Everything gleamed: polished wood floors, expensive paintings on the walls, furniture that looked like no one had ever dared to put their feet on it. Aunt Catherine served iced tea in tall glasses that clinked with ice cubes. My parents and Aunt Catherine chatted about adult things while I sat quietly, tracing the patterns on the rug with my shoes, trying not to feel out of place. After about an hour, Dad stood up and stretched. "Well, we should get going, it's a long drive back." I immediately jumped up too, reaching for my small suitcase. "Okay, let me grab my stuff." That's when it happened. The moment that split my life into before and after. My parents exchanged a quick, strange look. Mom cleared her throat. "Actually, honey, you're going to stay here with Aunt Catherine for a while." My heart skipped. "How long?" Dad avoided my eyes. "We'll see. You'll have fun here. Aunt Catherine has cable television, and just look at that backyard." I felt my chest tighten. "But when are you coming back?" "Soon," Mom said quickly. "We'll call you." Their voices were rushed, their hugs short and awkward, like they were in a hurry to get it over with. I chased them to the door. "Wait. What about school this fall? What about Josh and Carter?" Dad didn't even turn around. "We'll figure it out. Be good for Aunt Catherine." And just like that, the door closed behind them. I ran to the porch and watched their car drive down the long gravel driveway, the taillights fading until there was nothing left but dust in the summer air. At first, I was more confused than scared. But deep down, something heavy began to settle in my stomach. Aunt Catherine gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Come on, dear. Let me show you to your room." The room she gave me was bigger than my entire bedroom back home. A canopy bed with soft sheets, my own bathroom, wide windows overlooking a backyard with a pool and a garden that seemed to stretch forever. Under different circumstances, I would have been thrilled. Instead, all I could think was, why me? Why now? Why here? Still, Aunt Catherine tried. She told me we'd go shopping the next day for anything I needed. She took time off work that first week: shopping trips, a movie, teaching me how to use her sleek computer. She asked about my friends, my favorite subjects, what I liked to do for fun, and she actually listened, nodding, smiling, asking more questions. It felt so strange to have an adult care about my answers. But as the days turned into weeks, the silence from my parents grew louder than anything. I kept asking Aunt Catherine if they had called. "Not yet, sweetheart," she'd say, always with that patient voice. "I'm sure they will soon." But the phone never rang. Not that week, not the next, not even after a month had passed. That's when the truth began to creep in that maybe they weren't coming back at all. School was supposed to start soon back in Alabama, and the thought had been eating at me for days. One morning, while Aunt Catherine sipped her coffee from a delicate china cup, I finally blurted out, "Aunt Catherine, I think I need to go home soon. School starts in 2 weeks." She set her cup down slowly, her eyes fixed on me in a way that made my stomach twist. "Madison," she said softly, "we need to have a talk." The words made my throat tighten. "Are Mom and Dad coming to get me soon?" I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer wasn't going to be the one I wanted. Aunt Catherine took a deep breath. "No, sweetheart. They're not coming back. Your parents have decided they can't take care of you anymore. They've officially given up their parental rights, and I've adopted you. That means I'm your legal guardian now. You're going to live with me permanently." For a second, the room tilted. The words didn't make sense, like they were spoken in a language I couldn't translate. I kept waiting for her to say she was joking, that there'd been some mistake, but she just sat there sad, steady, and determined. That's when the tears came. Not the angry kind, but the heavy, gasping sobs that leave you breathless. Everything I thought I knew about my life shattered in that moment. Even though my parents had never showered me with attention, they were still my parents. They weren't supposed to give me away like an old coat that didn't fit anymore. My voice cracked as I asked, "What about Josh and Carter? Did they give them away too?" "No," she said gently. "They kept your brothers. That cut deeper than anything else. They kept Josh and Carter, but not me. I wasn't worth keeping. I cried for 3 days straight, my little body aching from the weight of it all. Through it all, Aunt Catherine never pushed. She brought me bowls of soup I barely touched, boxes of tissues that piled up by my bed, and simply sat with me. She didn't try to spin it, didn't tell me everything would be okay, didn't defend my parents' decision. She just let me feel it. That quiet presence was the only anchor I had. On the fourth morning, something inside me shifted. I looked in the mirror, my face puffy and streaked with dried tears, and thought, if I'm going to live here now, I have two choices. I can keep waiting for people who don't want me, or I can try to build a life with the one person who does. At breakfast, I pushed my plate forward and looked at Aunt Catherine. I don't want to think about them anymore. If they don't want me, then I don't want them either. Her eyes softened, and for the first time in days, I saw her smile. That was the start of my new life. Aunt Catherine enrolled me in the local elementary school, and to my surprise, I liked it better than my old one. The classrooms were smaller, the teachers actually knew my name, and for once, I felt seen. I made my first real friend, a girl named Emma, who lived down the street. Life with Aunt Catherine was nothing like the life I'd known. When I came home from school, she wanted to hear about my day. She sat beside me at the kitchen table, helping me with homework, explaining the things I didn't understand. She showed up at my school plays, sat through every parent-teacher conference, and even bought me books, not for Christmas or birthdays, but simply because she noticed how much I loved to read. Her work fascinated me too. She was a financial director at a large company, and sometimes she'd explain her job in simple terms. She taught me about saving my allowance, how money adds up, and why it matters to understand costs. Those lessons stuck. The years slipped by quickly. I got good grades, tried soccer for a season, and even took piano lessons. More importantly, Aunt Catherine and I built our own rhythm. We cooked dinner together most nights, laughed over burned casseroles, and curled up on weekends to watch old black and white movies. She told me stories about my dad when he was young, though she never spoke much about him as an adult. And somewhere in the middle of those years, I realized something profound. Aunt Catherine wasn't just filling in for what I'd lost. She was giving me something I'd never had in the first place: a real home, a safe place, and the kind of love that doesn't walk away. When I turned 14, Aunt Catherine asked me something I never expected. We were sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of my homework between us, when she set down her pen and said, "Madison, would you like to visit your parents and brothers? I can arrange it if you want." For about 10 seconds, I thought it over. Then I shook my head. They never called, never wrote, never asked how I was doing. Why would I want to see them now? "Sometimes people change," she said gently. "Maybe they regret their decision." I looked her in the eye and said, if they regretted it, they would have reached out. It's been 6 years, Aunt Catherine, 6 birthdays. 6 Christmases, and not even a card. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I think you're right. But I wanted you to know the option was there." That was the last time we ever talked about my parents for a long while. Life settled into its rhythm again, and life with Aunt Catherine was good. She was strict about grades and chores. She expected my best, but she was also fair. She cared about how I felt, about what I thought. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. But when I turned 16, everything changed again, and this time it wasn't me who was hurt, it was Aunt Catherine. She started losing weight, saying she was tired all the time. At first, she brushed it off as work stress. But the doctor's tests told another story. I remember the night she came home from the hospital, her face pale but steady. We sat down in the same spot where she had once told me about my parents. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Madison, I have some bad news. I have cancer, and it's serious." It felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. My throat went dry. "Are you going to die?" I whispered. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I'm going to fight this as hard as I can. I'm stepping away from my job so I can focus on getting better." "What about money? What about the house?" I asked, panicked. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about that. I've saved plenty over the years, and I have good insurance. We'll be fine." Those next 2 years were the hardest of my life. Aunt Catherine went through rounds of chemotherapy and radiation. Some weeks, she was strong enough to go to the movies with me or sit out by the pool. Other weeks, she could barely get out of bed. I learned how to cook more than just scrambled eggs, how to keep the laundry folded, and how to drive her to appointments the minute I got my license. When I was 17, the doctors told us the cancer was gone. We celebrated quietly, thinking maybe we'd beaten it. But hope was short-lived. Right around my 18th birthday, it came back fiercer than before. That birthday, it was just the two of us at home. She was too weak to go out, but she insisted on baking me a cake, even though it took everything out of her. Then she handed me a small box with a necklace inside an heirloom that had belonged to her mother. "I'm proud of the woman you've become, Madison," she whispered. "You're strong, smart, and kind. I know you'll do great things." 2 months later, I graduated from high school. Aunt Catherine was in the hospital and couldn't be there in person, but Emma's mom filmed the ceremony. We set up a video call so Aunt Catherine could watch me walk across the stage. She cried as she watched, her smile brighter than I'd seen in months. A month later, she was gone. I was at her side in the hospital when she drifted to sleep and didn't wake up again. She was only 53. After Aunt Catherine died, I felt completely lost. I was 18, legally an adult, but sitting in that big house by myself, I had never felt more like a child. No roadmap, no parents, no aunt. Just silence. Thankfully, Aunt Catherine's best friend, Susan, stepped in. She had been in Aunt Catherine's life since college and knew exactly how important I was to her. Susan helped me plan the funeral, calling her coworkers, her church friends, and anyone who had loved her. She stood by me when I could barely stand on my own. For the first time since Aunt Catherine's diagnosis, I realized I wasn't completely alone. Susan looked at me after the funeral arrangements were set and said gently, "I should probably call your father. He's Catherine's only living sibling besides you. Do you want to call him or should I?" My chest tightened. "You do it, please. I haven't talked to him in 10 years. Susan nodded, dialed the number, and put the phone on speaker so I could hear. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice finally answered. "Hello. Hi, this is Susan Collins. I'm calling about your sister, Catherine. I'm afraid I have some bad news. She passed away yesterday." There was a pause on the line. For a moment, I thought maybe he was stunned into silence, maybe even grieving. But then he spoke. "Oh, I see." His voice was flat. Susan cleared her throat. "The funeral is this Saturday at 2 o'clock at St. Mary's Church in Little Rock. I can text you the address." "Well, that's unfortunate timing," he said casually. "My son Carter just got promoted at his job, and we're throwing a big celebration party on Saturday. The whole family's coming, and we've already paid for the catering." I felt my stomach drop. Susan's eyes widened in disbelief. "I'm sorry," she said sharply. "Did you just say you can't attend your own sister's funeral because of a party?" "Look, it's not just a party," Dad replied. "This is a big deal for Carter. He's worked really hard, and we've been planning this for weeks. Catherine would understand that family comes first." Susan's voice went cold. "Catherine was your family, too." "Of course she was," he answered quickly, "but she's gone now. The living have to come first. Besides, Madison's there to handle things, right? She's an adult now." Susan's hand tightened on the phone before she hung up without another word. When she turned to me, her face was a mix of pity and anger, but honestly, I wasn't shocked. Disappointed, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But surprised? Not at all. It was exactly what I expected from them. The funeral came on Saturday. About 50 people showed up, friends from Aunt Catherine's church, coworkers, neighbors, people who had seen firsthand the kind of woman she was. Susan gave a beautiful speech about Aunt Catherine's kindness, her strength, and how much she loved me. I managed to get through my own words without completely breaking down, though my hands trembled the whole time. When it was over and everyone left, I returned to the house alone. The silence hit me harder than I thought it would. Every corner of that house held a memory of our late-night talks, her laughter when we burned dinner, her voice humming to old songs while she folded laundry. Now, it was just me. 18 years old and suddenly responsible for more than I could process. Should I sell the house? Go to college like we planned? Get a job? Aunt Catherine and I had talked about dreams, but never about the practical steps. 2 days passed in a blur of uncertainty. Then, on the third day after the funeral, there was a knock at the front door. I froze. Slowly, I walked to the peephole, and what I saw nearly knocked the wind out of me. It was them. My parents. Both my brothers stood beside them, dressed neatly, like they belonged here. I opened the door, my hands cold. "Hi, Madison," Mom said brightly, stepping forward with open arms. "Oh, sweetheart." She tried to hug me, but I pulled back. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Dad brushed past me into the foyer like he owned the place. "We came to see how you're doing, of course. We're so sorry for your loss." Josh and Carter trailed in behind him, their eyes scanning the house, lingering on the furniture, the paintings, the mantel. Carter smirked. "Nice place," he said, running his hand along the polished wood. "Really nice." Mom sat down on the couch, smoothing her skirt like she was settling in for the evening. "You shouldn't be alone at a time like this. We're here to support you." I stayed by the door, my arms crossed. "Where were you 3 days ago when I needed support?" "You know, at the actual funeral?" Mom waved her hand dismissively, like it didn't matter. "Oh, honey." Mom leaned back on the couch like she owned the place and waved her hand. "You know, we had Carter's party. It was already planned and all the relatives were coming. We couldn't cancel something like that. We're here now, and that's what matters. We want to take care of you." For the first time since Aunt Catherine died, I laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh, it was bitter. "Take care of me? Where have you been the last 10 years? Mom's face hardened. "That's different. You were living with Catherine, and she was taking good care of you. But now that she's gone, you need your real family." My chest tightened. She was my real family. Josh finally spoke up, his voice flat. "Look, we get that you're upset, but you're being dramatic. We're here because you inherited all this." He waved his hand around the living room like he was appraising the furniture. Mom chimed in quickly, her tone syrupy sweet. "Honey, your father and I are just worried. It's a lot for someone your age to manage." "What responsibility?" I snapped. Carter smirked and leaned against the fireplace mantel. "Come on, Madison. This house must be worth at least $800, maybe $900,000, plus whatever money she left you. That's a lot for an 18-year-old. And just like that, the mask dropped. The truth was laid bare. They weren't here for me. They were here for the money. Dad tried to look serious, lowering his voice like he was making some kind of moral argument. "As Catherine's brother, I'm her rightful heir. I think it's only fair that I inherit at least half of her estate." "She left everything to me," I said firmly. He frowned. "A will can be contested. Especially when it involves someone so young, you're not equipped to handle this kind of money or property." Mom nodded along eagerly. "That's why we're here, sweetie. As your parents, we're your legal guardians. That means we can help you manage your inheritance responsibly." I looked at their faces so full of fake concern, but their eyes gave them away. Greed. Pure and simple. They thought they had me cornered. "Get out," I said quietly. "Right now." Mom's voice rose, sharp and scolding, the way it used to when I was little. "Madison, don't be ridiculous. We're not leaving. You need us." Josh and Carter exchanged glances and started walking toward the stairs. "We'll just pick out some rooms while you guys talk," Josh said casually. My hands shook with rage. That's when I remembered the business card tucked away in my nightstand, Aunt Catherine's lawyer, Mr. Patterson. He'd pressed it into my hand at the funeral and said, "Call me if you ever need anything." Well, I needed something now. I bolted to my room, dialed his number, and he answered on the second ring. "Mr. Patterson, this is Madison." My parents showed up at the house, and they're acting like they own the place. "They won't leave." "I'll be right there," he said firmly. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything until I get there." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I rushed to open it before my family could. Standing there was Mr. Patterson, tall, serious, with silver hair and a no-nonsense look that immediately steadied me. "Are you all right, Madison?" he asked gently. I think so. They're in the kitchen, eating our food. He gave me a small nod and stepped inside. Together, we walked into the kitchen. My family looked up mid-bite, sandwiches stacked on Aunt Catherine's best china plates. They had made themselves at home, as if they already owned the place. "Good afternoon," Mr. Patterson said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "I'm Daniel Patterson, Catherine's attorney. Madison called me because she's having some issues with uninvited guests." Dad stood quickly, puffing out his chest. "I'm Mark Henderson, Catherine's brother. We're not uninvited guests. We're Madison's parents and her legal guardians." Mr. Patterson raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Legal guardians? What makes you think that?" Mom jumped in, eager. "Madison is only 18. In Alabama, where she was born, you don't become a legal adult until 19. That means we're still responsible for her and her property." Mr. Patterson actually chuckled, shaking his head. "I see the confusion, but Madison hasn't lived in Alabama for 10 years. She's a legal resident of Arkansas now." Mr. Patterson's voice was steady, almost calm, as he laid the papers on the counter. "Madison has been a legal resident of Arkansas for the past 10 years. In this state, the age of majority is 18. She turned 18 3 months ago, which means she is a legal adult in every sense of the word." My parents stiffened, but before they could argue, Mr. Patterson continued, "Furthermore, Madison's guardianship was permanently transferred to Catherine 10 years ago, when you both surrendered your parental rights. Even if she were still a minor, which she isn't, you would have no authority over her life or her property." Josh frowned, clearly struggling to keep up. "But, she's still our sister." Mr. Patterson didn't even blink. "Biologically, yes. Legally? Number Catherine adopted her completely. You have no more legal relationship to her than any other stranger walking down the street." Carter's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. What about the inheritance? Dad's her brother. He should get something." Without missing a beat, Mr. Patterson pulled out another document from his briefcase. "Catherine's will is clear and legally binding. She left her entire estate to Madison. That includes this home, all financial assets, and personal property. The total value of the estate is approximately $3 million. The room went silent. You could have heard the hum of the refrigerator. My parents and brothers just sat there, mouths slightly open, eyes wide. Dad's face darkened to a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "That's not fair," he finally sputtered. "I'm her brother. Family should take care of family." That's when I finally spoke, my voice sharper than I expected. "You're absolutely right. Family should take care of family, so where were you when Aunt Catherine was fighting cancer? Where were you when I was driving her to chemotherapy, cooking her meals, holding her hand in the hospital while she cried? You weren't there. You didn't even bother to show up at her funeral." Mom's voice cracked, thin and weak. "We didn't know she was sick." I stared at her. "You didn't know, because you never called. You never wrote. You had 10 years to be my family, and you chose not to be." Mr. Patterson nodded toward me approvingly before turning back to them. "Would you like me to explain your legal options?" "Yes," I said firmly. He looked directly at my parents. "You have no legal claim to this property or inheritance. None. Madison is under no obligation to share anything with you. If you continue to harass her or attempt to pressure her into giving you money, I will not hesitate to file charges for harassment and trespassing." Dad's voice rose, shaking with anger. "This is ridiculous. We're her family. We came here to help her." Mr. Patterson stayed calm, folding his hands on the counter. "You came here the day after the funeral, after refusing to attend that funeral. Your timing speaks for itself." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "We need that money. Our house is falling apart. The boys need money for their futures, for their homes, their investments. That is not Madison's problem," Mr. Patterson cut in. "I'll ask you to leave this property immediately. If you refuse, I'll call the police." For a moment, I thought Dad might explode. But finally, with a sharp huff, he stood and motioned for the others to follow. They stomped out, muttering under their breath, slamming the front door behind them. I stood at the window and watched as their car pulled out of the driveway, heading back toward Alabama. "Thank you," I whispered to Mr. Patterson when the house was quiet again. "You're welcome," he said gently, but his eyes were cautious. "This may not be the end. People get desperate when money is involved." And he was right. For the next month, the phone never stopped ringing. They used different numbers each time, friends' phones, pay-as-you-go cell phones, always finding a way back to me. The voicemails piled up. "Madison, it's Mom. Please, we just want to be a family again. Hey, it's Josh. I'm trying to get married, but we can't afford a house. You've got the money. Just help us out." Carter's voice was harsher. "I've got a business investment lined up. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're sitting on millions while I'm struggling. That's not right." And then the tears again from Mom. "We made a mistake. We should never have left you. Please, forgive us. We need you." Each call twisted something inside me, but I remembered Aunt Catherine's steady voice, telling me to be smart, to protect myself. I saved every voicemail, every text, just like Mr. Patterson advised. After 4 weeks of harassment, Mr. Patterson had a folder thick enough to send them an official cease and desist letter. He laid it out in legal terms they couldn't ignore. If they contacted me again, we'd take them to court and pursue a permanent restraining order. That letter did what my words never could. The call stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was the kind of quiet that felt like freedom. Now, months later, I'm in college, studying to become a financial analyst just like Aunt Catherine once was. I live in her house, though by now it feels like mine. I barely touched the inheritance, using it only for tuition and basic living expenses. Aunt Catherine taught me the value of saving, of building a future, and I refuse to waste what she entrusted to me. People sometimes ask me if I feel guilty for not sharing a dime with my so-called family. The answer is simple: no. They made their choice a decade ago when they decided I wasn't worth keeping. Aunt Catherine made her choice too when she chose me, raised me, loved me. She was my family. She always will be. I think of her every single day. She taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about love, loyalty, and showing up when it matters most. I have friends now, a future I'm building, and a boyfriend, Ryan, who listens to my story and says, "You did the right thing." And for the first time in my life, I believe it. That's enough for me. This story carries several powerful lessons that speak deeply to life, resilience, and relationships, especially for middle-aged adults reflecting on family, loyalty, and legacy. One of the clearest messages is that family is not defined by blood but by love and presence. Madison's parents gave her away, treating her as a burden, while Aunt Catherine stepped in and gave her the unconditional support she needed. For anyone who has experienced neglect or favoritism in their family, this story is a reminder that true family is built through actions, not titles. It also highlights the importance of protecting yourself from toxic relationships. Madison learned to set firm boundaries when her parents tried to return only after money was involved. Many adults struggle with guilt when distancing themselves from unhealthy relatives, but her story shows that choosing peace and dignity over manipulation is not selfish, it is necessary. Finally, Aunt Catherine's influence teaches us the lasting value of mentorship, financial wisdom, and stability. By modeling responsibility and love, she not only rescued Madison from abandonment but also prepared her to thrive independently. For middle-aged readers, this story is a call to examine the legacy we leave behind, not in terms of money alone, but in the lives we touch, the love we give, and the strength we help others find in themselves.